everybody, and welcome to the Ramsey Library Brown Bag Series talk. We're delighted today to have Amanda Maxwell with us, who will be talking about advising for pre-health students. Amanda?
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for your attention coming today. I am going to lead this session on pre-health professions advising at UNC Asheville, but I also have some of our other pre-health advisory committee members here, and I'll go through, my goal today is to go through some information and share some resources that you can access later and on your own, and then take some comments from the committee members and then answer questions, because this is really for you all. So let me share my screen real quick. So my goal today is, I have a couple of things. So my first goal is to try to share information so that students will get the help, the advising, the connections that they need so that they can be successful. First goal. Second goal is to do something that I like to call, I like to use the analogy from the military of force multipliers. So I and Dean Holt and Dr. Meigs are, and Grayson in the Office of Advising, we are limited in our time. And so if we can help other advisors know where the resources are and what the best starting point of advising for pre-health professions and careers, if we can share that information, then we just multiplied ourselves and enabled everybody. So that is my second goal. So you can see I'm sharing the screen with you. We have a website, the pre-health professions. If you just Google UNCA pre-health professions, it comes up. Chapel Hills gets hit more, so make sure you go down and find ours. And I'm just going to navigate through the links that are here. So the vast majority of the resources that we share as a committee are on this website. We also do a lot of other things to share information, but I want to make this as available and open as possible. So first, let me just let you know that there is a committee of people who work to be up to date with the best practices and supporting our students to become successful applicants to pre-health or to healthcare programs and competent practitioners in the future. So unfortunately, our website is not completely up to date. So we have some new participants, and you can see we have Dr. Fu in psychology. We have Dr. Brock in chemistry. He also at toxicology, and then he also teaches in the MPH program. We have Dr. Jones in health wellness promotion. Dean Holt is our director. Judy Beck has rolled off. This is me, and I am the coordinator and do most of the logistics for pre-health. Maybe. Dr. Meigs is in biology. Dr. Nealon has rolled off, but he was in psychology, and so he is knowledgeable, but he is not officially on the committee at this point. And Dr. Wingert, another person in health wellness promotion, and then Dr. Wolf in chemistry. So our goal with the committee is to have people in multiple different departments so that they can bring their own insight into how the committee operates and how we support our students, and to increase the access to different students. So these are people who, as an advisor, that if you have a student who comes to you and says, I'm interested in biology and I want to go into healthcare, but I'm not really sure. So I'm going to give you a few tasks to direct them to get your students to do. One of the first ones is, and I just put it in the chat, is to sign up for the newsletter. And you all are welcome to sign up for it as well. just put that you're faculty or staff. And I only send it out 2 to 3 times a semester. And I'm going to show it to you in a second. And you'll see that it's got lots of information on it. But so you would encourage, I would hope that you would encourage that student to check out our website, sign up for the email list, and then potentially go see Dr. Meeks. Or maybe the student is interested in psychology, and you would say, well, Dr. Nealon used to be on it, but Dr. Fu is now on the committee, so he'd be a great person for you to talk to. Okay, so this is our committee. The next, I want to show you some of the resources for actually specifically advising students on how to get started. So you notice I go up to Learn, I go to Student Course Resources and Recommendations. I have a number of links in here. You'll notice if you go through this, a lot of times I hyperlink to events and opportunities, and that's under Engage. We'll go there in a second, but that's because I'm trying to get students to go there because that is the most up-to-date on how they can access information that's happening this semester. I have old PowerPoints as well that are supposed to be, that are ideally designed so that someone could just thumb through them and not need to attend a session potentially to get the information. But what I want to show you here is something that I always warn students, this may feel a little overwhelming when you first see it, because it's a lot of courses. If you want to go to med school, you have a lot of foundational knowledge to gain so that you are ready to go into that graduate program and be successful. But I also make sure to remind them that it takes years to get this, and you're just going to do it one step at a time, one semester at a time. And this form right here is set up so that students who are interested in applying to one of the I would say 5 most common graduate programs that we get can compare the coursework so that they know that if they're interested in potentially 2 things, like I'm interested in pharmacy, but I'm also kind of interested in dentistry, they can see where there's overlap in the required or recommended courses. And these are the courses that we've identified as either required or very highly recommended because of the track record that we've seen with students who have to take a graduate professional exam, such as the MCAT for medicine, the PCAT for pharmacy, the DAT for dental, or the MCAT or GRE for some vet schools. That depends. And we have identified that students taking basically 5 semesters of chemistry and then enfolding in the labs, and then ideally at least 3 or more semesters of biology. They need 2 semesters of physics, and it can be either the introductory or the calc-based. And then other courses to help round out their education so they're most prepared, 1 for the graduate admission test, and then 2 for actually being in that graduate program. So this, again, when I share this with students, I tell them it looks like a lot, and they're just gonna, I use the analogy how to eat an elephant 1 bite at a time, and so the goal is really just to get them started on that. So how do I get students started on that? So we don't actually have a degree in pre-med or pre-health at UNC Asheville. What we do instead is we help, oh, I apologize. This is what I'm trying to get to. Okay, so this is a document I've created that I have just over the years tried to add more and more helpful information to students. And what I will do with students is create a timeline for them to add all of those courses that we were just looking at, which are also included on the second page here. I go through and I start adding them. So if I have a student who is, say, interested in one of those disciplines, they know that in the first piece of information, one of the most important things for a student to start doing is get started with the chemistry. Chemistry, if you look over here at the prerequisites and you go down, chemistry is a prerequisite for this biology class. And that biology class is a prerequisite for many of the other biology classes they need. So they've got to get that chemistry in. So I will suggest to the student that maybe they take chemistry in their fall semester. But before I sign them up for that, I say, how are your math skills? And if a student is says, well, I'm not sure. And, how good do they need to be? I will literally do this. I will hold up an equation. This is my litmus test. And say y equals mx plus b. Can you solve for m? And if the student says, yeah, then I say, you are probably ready for chemistry. You've got to just be comfortable with your algebraic stuff. There's going to be some other math you're going to move in there, but you've got to be really comfortable with that. If I show students this equation and they say, I remember that, but basically they're hesitating, I say, you probably will do best to also add Math 167, because when you go into chemistry, it's a challenging course, but you're going to be learning the chemistry. They're going to assume that you have the math. You can go ahead and sign up for that chemistry, but you should be getting math. You should be building your math skills at the same time. I also suggest to students that if they're taking general chemistry, whether it be, so it should be early in their career, in their college career. It should also be, let me correct what I say. I tell students that in my experience, students do best when they treat it like a 5 or 6 hour course. It's a challenging course. Lots of different concepts, weird concepts that kind of boggle your brain at first, and then you study them a little bit longer, you put a few hours in, then you're like, oh, okay, I get that. But this next one is totally boggling my brain. I don't get it. That's for my experience. I love chemistry, but that is my experience with chemistry. It boggles my brain for a little bit, and then I figure it out and think that's really cool. And then the next one, I have to put in a few more hours. There's a lot of support systems in place from the university. There's peer tutors. There are chemistry student instructors who reteach the information. Faculty have office hours. We have a lot of resources to support students, but they need to take that class seriously, and maybe have a 12-hour semester or a 14-hour semester so that they can be successful. Okay, so back to advising students. We want students to get started with their general chemistry early in their college career. Let me go back to our website. I get there. Okay. And when you're advising someone for pre-health, and a lot of times students will say, well, what degree should I get? They should get the degree that they want, something that they enjoy learning about, that they're passionate about, because they will be happier while they're doing it. They will be more motivated to do it. And they'll be more enthusiastic, and that enthusiasm will trickle into everything else they do. So I have created some timelines that, I apologize, I clicked the wrong one. It's the 4-year outline. To give examples of how a student might scaffold their education, where they are folding in the pre-health classes as they go. Okay, so this one, it pretty much, we're taking over their first year in college and getting them into courses. but if you go through, there's multiple examples. So maybe a student didn't really know that they needed to go take some chemistry classes. Maybe they didn't really realize they were interested in pre-health. They just kind of decided to take cool classes in their first semester. Then maybe in their spring semester, they would sign up for the Gen Chem. I should probably put math in here as an example too. On these examples, you'll see that sometimes I have this repeated, the Psych 100, Soc 100, and Neuro 216. Those are classes that are going to help support the knowledge that they need for these careers and to get into the graduate programs, but they also help balance out their semesters. So students can pick and choose in order to balance out. And I initially advised students by just adding in classes, and I would just pick one that seemed to fit for students. And then I evolved to the other live document that you saw. So these are just, yeah, go ahead.
So I have a question. So in all these example plans, I think these example plans are nice to have. In all these example plans, that there is a group of courses that need to be taken, say, the first 2 years or the first 3 years to meet upper level prerequisites or to meet the necessary knowledge minimum to succeed on the MCAT. Do all these example plans sort of adhere to that principle? I guess my major question is, do they have to have like both of these social science courses in the first 2 years, or is that something that can wait until after the MCAT? That's my question.
That's a great question. So the MCAT has the MCAT actually tests on there's a large chemistry foundation. There's a large biology, biochemistry foundation. There's some physics, and it's trig-based physics. And it also tests on psychology and sociology, those 100 levels. And so the students that I have talked with who just tried to use a study book to prepare for the MCAT and study, for example, the psychology 100 content, it's doable, but it's just hard. It's much better if they have a class where it can reinforce those concepts. And the same, I think it might be a little bit easier with the sociology. And I think that might be because they're getting the humanities as well. And so they're getting this other content about how institutions and systems work in relation to the individual. But it is my ideal student would finish. Let me find an example that I don't know if I have a perfect example here. My ideal student would, I don't have a perfect example. So these are old, these are dated. My ideal student would finish all of their pre-med classes in the semester before they study for the MCAT. And the reason is because when they're studying for the MCAT, theoretically it should be review, if not them learning material for the first time. So if this student, for example, is taking the biological biochemistry or the chemistry version of biochemistry and perhaps physics too, they are learning material while they're also supposed to be reviewing it. And as we all know that when you revisit information, the knowledge sinks in deeper. All of these plans put students on a trajectory where they take the MCAT and apply to medical school in the spring, summer of at the end of their junior year, so that they could start med school right after they graduate. Now, is that the best plan? I don't always think so, but Ted, I would love to have your comment. Yeah.
Sure, thanks. So to Jason's question, it's sort of funny because you end up doing this almost backward from the way we are sometimes told to advise. Like, the old way would be to get all the gen ed stuff out of the way early and then, let people load up on, advanced like courses in their major kind of for the second half of their college career. And what I sometimes do is I'll have students where they'll ask me, hey, I'm a junior, should I be taking like biochemistry and physics because I'm getting ready to do the MCAT in the summer that, before senior year. And I'll tell them, sure, don't, you can take like humanities 324 and 414, like during your senior year, you can, and that way you can make sure that you are getting, these courses that would be applicable to the MCAT. It never works out perfectly. Like you'll get a student will say, gosh, I wish I could squeeze in micro and genetics and everything up to that point. And sometimes they can't do it all. This is partly why a lot of students I've seen will sort of like make that deal with themselves that they're going to take the gap year because, that way they can take essentially 8 semesters of classes and then do the MCAT and then sort of understand that they've got that year for, doing, like getting some clinical hours, volunteering, interning, whatever. And they're applying for the to the med schools during that time. But yeah, for the ones who really want to try to, do 4 years of undergrad and then go straight to med school, a lot of times I'll have them, stack some of the, important but not on the MCAT classes, like the humanities or maybe like an Arts 310 or something. I'll encourage them to push that to senior year so that they can squeeze more biology and physics and chemistry into the junior year.
Yeah, that's a good point. And another thing that I will do as well is encourage students to even put the Arts 310 in the semester they're studying for the MCAT. And I'll talk about this in a little bit. We have a donor who has offered us, our students, 10 grants to be able to take a review course worth $2,700 from Princeton Review for studying for the MCAT. And that is scheduled, this is the 3rd year we're offering it, and it starts in the spring. It's 2 nights a week. You can't read it, but that's the schedule up there. And it's 3 hours twice a week. And so this is students, they're getting exposed to information there. They're getting review, they're learning strategies on how to study for the MCAT, but they're also studying outside of that, and they're taking practice tests. And the students who are most successful spend a minimum of 250 hours studying for the MCAT and separately take approximately 10 or more practice tests. And these tests are at least 7 hours long. So you put that together, that's 320 hours invested into studying for this test. And so I try to give them a really light, 12 credit hours. Hopefully they've already taken all the courses they need, and then they're going to be adding, or they've taken the key courses, and then maybe they're also taking micro here, or maybe they're also taking like one additional class, maybe 2 additional classes that are continuing to supplement the core knowledge they need for the MCAT, but they're also taking courses that are less, that may, I don't want to say easier, but I would say non-natural science, non-lab based, not classes without a lab, so that they just have more time in their schedule, more mental space to tackle the natural science learning that they have to focus on for the MCAT. So what happens with advising, my goal for this is to share the information that students need to get started on these courses, that there are lots of resources available, and really getting them started on that general chemistry. Because general chemistry is a prerequisite for this biology class, which at this point is only offered in the spring. And so students will, if something happens and they're not able to take this biology in the spring, then they will be taking it. They'll have to wait a year, which just pushes things back. And so if we can get students started on that coursework a little bit earlier, and I think that the pandemic has really impacted student engagement on campus. I used to bribe them with food to come to advising events, and can't really do that so much anymore. But we have all these committee members who are then going to help students navigate the rest of this. And I would strongly encourage that every student come and meet with one of us at least. I like to try to at least touch base with every student and just get them on my radar so that if I find out about opportunities or different, events, that I can know what they're interested in and I can prioritize them, or I can, hound them to participate. Like, hey, I sent you an email. Did you check it? Oh, did you see it? You didn't see it. Well, let me tell you about this cool thing. And if a student's not on my radar, then I don't know to try to track them down.
So just a second question, and this is just for my own clarification. So the goal would be for pre-med students to finish, you called them the core courses, but they're essentially the required courses for their pre-medical track, right? Like that's what you mean. The goal is to have them finish those courses the semester before they take the professional examination. And so whether it's semester 5 or semester 7 or whenever the devil, but the semester before. And did I understand that right?
Yes, you did. And this is, we've had students who do it. There's no one way to do it. A student could go right now without taking any of these courses and take the MCAT. Chance of a successful score is not good. The students who have done the best have completed all of these chemistry courses, and the biochemistry could potentially come from the biological. And they have taken at least 3 courses in biology. The ones that if we go back over here, there's a reason that these are bolded. And now we're getting into the nuance of like the committee and what we talk to students about. The reason that certain ones of these are bolded are because these are the ones that students tell us help them the most on the MCAT. A little nuance, and I don't want to, make anyone mad or anything, but students say that the chemistry version of biochemistry seems to help them more than the biological. And this is coming from students who take them at the same time, they might take the biology version first and then the chemistry, or vice versa. I wonder if it's just because this biochemistry is reinforcing a lot of the concepts that they learned in the previous chemistry. And so they're getting this extra opportunity to study that and apply it. I don't know. But the chemistry, biochemistry, the mammalian physiology, and the cellular biology. Now, a student could take the HWP, Anatomy and Physiology 1 and 2. The reason that this one is bolded, again, not to make anyone mad, but this one has students have the requirement of cell and molecular biology beforehand, which means that they have this foundation of how the cell works and how this kind of like cell-based perspective on the physiology. And this is, it's a 300 level, so theoretically it would be more content. So for whatever reason, this is what students say. Cellular biology, again, is another great one. That was the one that helped me the most in like putting it all together in my head as a pre-med student and as a medical student. And then I also know that Dr. Meigs gives challenging exams. And when students have taken this class and they have a 6-hour, I hear, take-home exam, and then they get to the MCAT and they have a 7-hour exam, they're like, you know what? I'm kind of used to it now.
Mine's 5 hours, but whatever.
Okay. And it's I guess it grows. It's like a fish story. It grows in their head, maybe. So it's not only the content, but also the other components like that that help support students' preparation for this quite challenging test. I mean, it's get back to my original page. Okay, so support for the coursework is important. And then there are other pieces and parts that we try to give them, share information with them in multiple ways. So again, I try to make lots of things available on this website. And I'm going to go through this in just a little more detail, but every semester there's multiple advising events that happen before and right at the beginning of registration for the next semester. There's other learning opportunities where students can engage, start to understand issues with disparity for people of color in getting educated in medicine, but also in getting adequate healthcare. Be the match, bone marrow donor stuff, so we have a lot of things here. Let me go back and start from the beginning. The student group, their goal is to share information with students and about how to be successful in getting into medical school or pharmacy or dental or PA school, whichever the student is interested in. Their goal is also to help students get more experience, whether that's volunteer experience, community engagement. There's going to be a Valentine heart dissection on Friday that students can sign up for. So getting students engaged in the student group is going to be really helpful. Getting students, so that's the first thing. Now there's an email list. Now this is my email list, but it has a question on the form that I already added it to the chat. But if you click on this, if you're faculty and staff and you just want to be on the email list, you have that option too. But this just asks students, what are you interested? When are you going to graduate? What's your first choice? What's your second choice? So that way, I can, the committee members and I can try to make sure that we are accommodating students' interests in the future things. And then we all are trying to figure out how to get students to pay attention more to like things that are happening. Apparently, the most recent word on the street is students are rarely checking their email, but they do check Instagram. So, so they're on social media. So, so the student group has created an Instagram account to try to notify students of things. The pre-health advising events. So these are events that I host primarily. Again, advising begins for us this semester on March 14th. The students are going to do a tabling event in front of Brown to try to create interest. And then the goal is to get students to come to one of these info sessions, 1 or 2. So the pre-health advising session 1, 2, and 3, those are the same. It's just an intro to help students start to connect. When students are getting closer to taking the MCAT and applying to, or I always say MCAT, but taking their graduate exam and applying to their graduate school, that is when they need this information. So this is open to everybody, but it's really important for sophomores, juniors, and seniors to get this extra information. I schedule these. I try to put them at different times during the advising schedule so that someone like maybe Dr. Schmelzer will, he teaches a 178, he could tell his students to come to one of these if he knows they're interested in healthcare in some way. They come and see this, they have a foundation of knowledge of what they need before they go and advise with him, and he helps them with their schedule for the next semester. So that is one of my main goals, is to give students, in general, give students the information they need here so that they can then go to their advisor and say, well, so I should get started on my chemistry, but I also am interested in this neuroscience 216 because that sounds cool. So maybe I think I'm going to take those 2 next semester. So it's really to if we can get students into these, it's going to make your advising hopefully easier with these students. So just to complete what's on this website, there are other, I've kind of put some historical things in here that just to give people an idea of kind of to advertise what we do for pre-health or what we've done in the past. If you or a student sign up for the newsletter, when you finish this form and you submit it, it will give you a link to our newsletter. So the newsletter, let me show you what that looks like real quick. This is a live document. This link will always take you back to it. It is updated regularly, ideally. There are hyperlinks here. So for example, here's some recorded events from last spring. And if you click on it, it'll take you down and you can see a recording of the overview of pre-health. You can see a recording of this, this event that is the one for sophomores, juniors, and seniors about letters of recommendation and applying to graduate programs. The slides are here as well so that students can just look at the slides, or you can just look at the slides and there's lots of hyperlinks that are helpful. A Q&A with a dentist in town who is also, she was in the MPH program at the same time. A Q&A with one of our graduates who was a first-year medical student at the time. So that recording is here too. So I make these recordings available through the newsletter, not on our website. But there's also other resources in here for students, including the advising events that are here. So encouraging students again to sign up for that will hopefully help them help themselves. Let me think for a second. What helps a student be successful overall, big picture? They need the science knowledge. We've talked a lot about that, but what else do students need to be successful? I pulled up this page from UNC Chapel Hill. So in-state school, very, very, competitive, highly ranked on US News and World Report for whatever that's worth. But what do they say is their ideal candidate? Look at this, more than a good student, more than a volunteer. So I show you this because I also want students to start getting engaged in service in their first year of school. I tell students one of the easiest ways to do that when you're a first year student is join student groups and start getting involved. And then start taking on some responsibility. That's moving them into a position of leadership, and they should choose things that they're interested in. Again, if they like it, they'll do more. They'll be happier with the time they spend doing it, and they'll get more deeply engaged. That makes them more than a volunteer. The experience of a student actually directly working directly with people and helping to organize events or organize things to help provide service to people is a much more rich experience than just going occasionally and serving food, maybe at a shelter. Medical schools want students to get proximal to the people that they are that need them to care for them later in life. And so that's what it means really by more than a volunteer. More than an interest in medicine. So what does this mean? In general, they want students to be sure that they know that they, what they're getting into and that they like it. Students should work to not only try to shadow, but maybe do service in a clinical setting as well. So there's two kinds of service potentially here. Volunteering just in general to serve people who have less advantage than others maybe, and then also engaging in the healthcare system in different capacities to understand the career and the needs that exist. And then more than good on paper. So medical school as an example, is one of the hardest graduate programs to get into. My personal opinion is PhD programs are probably harder from what I've seen from colleagues and stuff, but medical school does ask for a lot. Pharmacy schools ask for a lot from their applicants, and it's possible for certainly possible for students to get in, because as you see, so events that are tentatively scheduled, we don't have a date yet, but we have 2 students who are in the Eshelman School of Pharmacy here on campus, and they're going to do a pharmacy Q&A about like how did they decide on pharmacy, and what did they do that helped them be successful. And then a medical school application Q&A. We have 2 current students who haven't graduated yet and have gotten into multiple schools. We have another student who graduated last year and got into multiple schools. And so we'll do a Q&A with that as well. So, it's not impossible, but it does take an investment and commitment from the student. So the last couple things I just want to mention is, what if a student is not ready to apply? Well, let me back up and say, when I talk to graduate programs, when I've heard from deans of admission from different healthcare graduate schools, the thing they always say is a student should apply when they're ready. Like, what does that mean? If a student is feeling rushed, if a student is feeling like they don't have enough experience, then wait a year, take that gap year, which is better called a growth year, because that growth year gives them an opportunity to engage more deeply with these other parts of what it is to be human, and to start to refine their ability to be successful in the art of medicine. And I use that word specifically, the art of medicine, because it's not just the science, it's the art of communicating with others and listening to others. So some ways in which a student might do that. One example is we have the MPH program here in Asheville now, in collaboration with UNC Gilling School of Public Health. This would be a great program for a student it's a 2-year program that is full-time, but designed for working adults. So the student could engage more deeply with their community and with some of that, the aspect of the bigger picture of providing quality healthcare in our community. This kind of program is good for a student who wants more experience, or maybe they want to take a break before jumping into medical school. But another example, and I don't have one pulled up, another type of student, we may have a student who graduates, but they still need their foundation in the sciences is not strong enough yet. Like, they maybe take a practice MCAT and they don't do very well, and they think, oh, I need to take more classes. What should they do? They could, they have different opportunities. They could take additional classes as a post-bac to supplement their knowledge. They could get a second degree. They could do a master's program in an area of natural sciences that's going to support the foundational knowledge that they need, but also that's directly related to the type of healthcare they want to practice. So if they want to do some kind of sports medicine, then maybe they would go into a master's program that focuses in on, that aspect of science, as opposed to doing, or if they want to do infectious disease eventually, then they might go and get a master's in microbiology. So because students have to have strong scientific knowledge, and then they need this other kind of holistic understanding of medicine in the community, and whichever piece is not quite there when they graduate, that's what they should pursue. There are post-bac programs that are also year-long. Furman has one. We have a student, a recent graduate, who's at Morehouse getting a Master's of Science in Medical Sciences. That's a 1-year program, and it's designed to support, both of those programs are designed to support students who want to go into medical school, dental school, pharmacy school, but they need they feel like they need a little bit stronger foundation. And then another program, if a student just wants to take a break and but be able to like serve their community. MedServe is, and the name is kind of small here, but MedServe is a 2-year program where students do something sort of like Teach for America or AmeriCorps, but students are placed in a clinic. And they, after that 2 years, will have approximately 1,700 hours of direct patient care time. Plus they are given projects within the clinic that they're working, where they're in a position of leadership and working with programs and patients. So this can be another really great hands-on experience for students, especially, I haven't mentioned it yet, but PA programs often require somewhere between 500 and 1,500 hours of direct clinical care time. And so for a student that's a couple years of work. And so this MedServe is specifically designed to support students around that. So that is everything I wanted to go through. That's a lot of information. I asked the committee members who are here to think of advice that they would share. And actually, I was driving into campus. I ran into Brooke Jordan Brown, who you may remember from the basketball team, health wellness promotion major, biology minor, and leaning out my window, "Hey, Brooke, how are you?" All right. So she said, I asked her, what if you, one piece of advice from you, she's a second year pharmacy student in the Eshelman School of Pharmacy here. What piece of advice would be the best advice for me to tell other advisors? And she said, and I'm tooting my own horn right now because I had her in my first year symposium class. She was like, honestly, it was you getting me on the right track with my coursework early, because she said that some of her friends and colleagues from undergrad ended up having to take additional classes after they graduated because they didn't start on those courses early enough. And that's exactly what I told Brooke in the first semester. I was like, we need to get you in chemistry. You want to be a pharmacist? I actually said you should, she really wanted the health wellness promotion major. I was like, you should get a chemistry minor. She decided she liked the biology minor, but even the biology minor gives you a lot of chemistry foundation. And then I believe she took a few extra classes. So that's the piece of advice. Get them started on the right track with their coursework early. So Dean Holt, Dr. Meeks, would y'all share any words of wisdom?
Go ahead, Ted.
Oh, thanks, Herman. I mean, my only just comment might be that when I talk to students who want to, go into a pre-health profession, this, med school or dental or PA, I try and get them engaged early in the process. And, we're always there to help them, but I also want to make sure that they have some agency, some ownership of the whole process. So I encourage them to, start looking at schools that they think they might want to apply to. Like if they're interested in going to PA school, have them look at, like say Wake Forest or others, and look at what the admissions requirements are. I help them find that if they need me to help them, but that way they start getting a real feel for, okay, I'm going to need definitely these classes or these other classes, because a lot of the schools have, there's not one universal set of classes that every school in the field is going to agree on. So, that's what I always like to do, and that's fine to have them do that, that way we're not, abdicating our responsibilities, but we're getting them, invested in it right early on, showing them that there are ways they can get on there and gather a lot of information, and they can run it by us and we can discuss it. But that way they don't just kind of show up empty-handed to the advising meetings, like, kind of waiting for all the answers to be provided to them by us. So it's okay to do that.
That's great advice. And what I will tell students, this page has a lot of information on it, but if you scroll down to resources, programs, this section, these two links right here give, if a student's interested, say in a PA program or going to PA schools, they could go here and start learning about different careers. And I'm not sure where PA is right now, but if you click on any of these, it will take them, it'll give them a summary of the career, and it will give them, like number of years of education, things like that. And then down at the bottom, it'll link them directly to the national organization affiliated with that career. And I always tell students, the more you know, the better prepared you're going to be overall. So if a student is interested in PA, they're dead set on PA, but they go in there and they start looking at other careers and things, they're going to have a greater understanding of the medical system and how different professions work together, which makes them a more competitive applicant, because they're in an interview with a PA program saying, I'm really interested in this, and I, have, some interest in working alongside these other professionals to provide better care. So the more they learn, the more they know, the better, the more successful they're going to be.
And I'll say that, although, there's a lot of emphasis on the core of the natural sciences, that a student doesn't need to major in a natural science major, and that they should choose something that they truly love and enjoy because of the competitiveness of the application process, that they're not going to get what they want necessarily, that they may not get into their first choice institution. They may not get into medical school this year at all. And they might decide to navigate differently, and therefore will need to kind of fall back on the major that they found really some joy in, and can continue moving down a path that way rather than their intended path towards medical school. So just making sure that that students understand that they can major in something other than a natural science course, but certainly that they need to focus on the natural sciences also to ensure that they are prepared for medical school and dental and the other schools they might want to be applying to.
This is from a link. This is the PowerPoint that is kind of self-explanatory. But students sometimes think they have to have a STEM related degree. But if you actually look at the number of people who matriculated or entered medical school by degree, the people who had a humanities degree, 50% of them got in. If you look at the total number who applied, there's a lot less. You look at the total number of people who had a biology degree, there were 28,000. So, people say maybe it's because they really stand out. You've got a humanities degree, and you're one of 1,700 instead of one of 28,000. But it may partly be because they have really worked on that other part of what it takes to be a good healthcare provider. You've got to know the science. You got to be able to do the science. But a physician once said to me, you could have the best pill in the world that will cure somebody, but that doesn't mean that you cured them, because they may not take it. They may not trust you. They may not be able to afford it. They may not be able to. They may not have a ride to the pharmacy. They may not tell you. They may be embarrassed to share something with you that's really important. And so they're that fraction of a percent of people who, if they take that pill, it won't cure them, or it might actually harm them. So medicine is the science, but it's also this other like human experience and communication skills and understanding of life that I think we do a fantastic job with at UNC Asheville. I mean, I'm a graduate from here, so I drank the Kool-Aid a long time ago. I would say that, but I think we really do. So but like Dean Holt was saying, they need a backup plan, and they should get a major in something they enjoy. Any other questions?
I mean, I was just going to
comments?
comment, following up on that slightly, is that one of the hardest things, I think, when we advise students who are going toward pre-health, career or health careers, there's some students where you start to see with the grades they're getting, the kind of performance they're showing academically, that it is going to be really, really tough sledding trying to get into a med school. And you, one of the things I do is try to have them really dig in and figure out a lot about, all sorts of healthcare careers, and if they want to go that way, and of course, to your point, if they major in something that's outside of STEM, then that can be their plan too. But they always, it's tricky because some students come in just feeling like that's their destiny is to go to med school, and if it is looking like it's going to be a tough chance for them to get in, we want to make sure that they see what their various options are. I mean, there are a lot of different ways one can contribute to healthcare, without becoming a physician. And we try and get them to dig in on that a little bit and see it, and find their own way. At that point they need to be figuring out what they want, what looks interesting to them, rather than waiting for someone to tell them what they should find interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I've sometimes I will do mentoring with a student to because they have envisioned themselves as a physician ever since they were little, and they tell me stories about like what it means to them. But then I start asking them questions. It's kind of that peer coaching thing. I ask them questions about what do they enjoy, what do they like, what is it about being a doctor, or what is it about being a pharmacist. And one student, for example, would have been a great candidate for medical school. But every time he came and talked to me about medical school, it's like his shoulders would hunch over. It's almost like he started to get smushed by a big weight. But he really enjoyed math. And when he talked about math, he would light up, and I was like, you know what? I think that you need time to decide if med school is right for you. You like math. Why not apply for a master's program in some area of mathematics that you're interested in? You can always, that still applies to medicine, because you can, everybody's doing all this research and they need to do statistical analysis, or they need to understand. I mean, it's not going to harm you in the long run. And I told him about the body language that I was seeing when he talked about it. He's now getting a PhD in math. He went from master's to PhD. And I mean, like, that's a success story. He has an interest in medicine, so perhaps he will use his mathematics skills to help support quality healthcare in the future. I don't know. But, another student who really enjoys talking to people and would get really bored having to study so much, because I mean, that's what you do when you've got to be a lifelong learner, and you've got to study. Most people have to study a lot. And so for this student, I was like, is medicine really the ideal path for you? If what you really want to do is talk with people, a physician talks with someone for, say in the hospital, maybe talks to them for 8 to 10 minutes, and then spends the next 45 or the next hour and a half, or, that much time before and after, looking at a computer, writing notes, communicating with the radiologist, ordering a test, identifying what the next part of the care plan is going to be, talking to the social worker about discharge, so that individual, as a physician, sometimes I only got that 8 minutes with a patient, but I spend an hour and a half taking care of them outside of that, but not in direct contact. So, actually helping a student think about what they really want to do, what makes them happy, and learning about other careers. Because even if they're still dead set on, like, for example, becoming that physician, at least they know what a pharmacist does. They know what a nurse does, and then they will be a better team member in the long run. So the last thing I just, as Ted was talking, I pulled up one of the last slides on that PowerPoint. I always used to share this with students, like, why is it all so difficult and stressful? Because you have a lot to learn, because it's part of building psycho-emotional skills or socio-emotional skills, because the people in charge had to walk uphill in the snow both ways when they were in your shoes. I don't know. But it, I can, there is a lot to learn. If they spread out med school, for example, to where you weren't doing 80 to 100 hours, or residency to 80 to 100 hours a week, it would be 6 years or 10 years long. And who's willing to do that? but you also you gain skills as you go. So I always tell them that, remember, a 1,000-mile journey begins with a single step. You just and I coach students and I say, what can you do today? Well, I have a organic chemistry test coming up. Can you organize your notes and start studying for that? Can you do some practice problems? Or if they say, well, I just finished all my tests, I don't have anything, I'm like, go to a website, start learning about the different schools. Start like what I did when I was a student here. I called the United Way because I wanted to volunteer and I didn't know how to get connected. I called the United Way and said, hey, this is the kind of volunteering I'd like to do. Can you help me? So just encouraging students to not to keep an eye on the big picture, but focus on what can they do today. Any other questions? Or I am on campus. I have lots of events coming up. There's also signs when they come into Zeiss, they'll see these signs with a QR code, whoops, on that side, to help students. Just help me get connected to your students. And thank you for your time and attention today. I appreciate it.